Hello Linux learners, this is George and welcome to another video. Now, today's video is probably a really good idea for a beginner to learn about, but probably more of I guess like an intermediate skill, somewhere in between beginner and intermediate skill. But the idea here today is to learn all about SELinux. And this might be a couple of parts, a couple of videos to fully explain. Now, SELinux stands for Security Enhanced Linux, and just as the name implies, it is a control that's used within the Linux kernel to make the system more of a mandatory access control. Now, mandatory access control is essentially a labeling system, right, where particular objects and devices and users get labeled as, access or no access. And then that's done by the system administrator, right? And then once that's set, the operating system, so Linux itself, would enforce it. But as a systems administrator, you have the ability to remove or disable essentially or remove SELinux so that it's back to like more of a discretionary access control, or you can permit SELinux to work and do its job and follow the mandatory access controls that you set in place. And it's really just a good way to harden your system and give a little bit more security on your system. So our purpose here today is to kind of give you a brief overview like I just did about what SELinux is. But I want to show you how to check the status of SELinux to see if it's on or what state it's in. And I also want to show you the configuration file for it. This way you know where to go and where to look in case you need to ever manipulate it. So let's go to our virtual machine over here. So we're going to cd into the etc. Now, I like to go step by step through the directory so you can kind of learn how the structures work. But essentially what you'd want to do when you start to get a little bit more comfortable on the command line, you want to do full pathing, right? CD, sys, you can even sometimes hit the tab button like I just did, right? And it'll get you there a lot quicker. But for now, I'd like you to see the pathing. So etc, long list it, take a quick look inside, and then we want to do the sysconfig directory. Sysconfig. All right, long list. So that's the reason why I take the long road, if you will, or long list everything. Okay, and inside here, we want to go to SELinux. All right, let me move my face out of the way. Oop, goodbye. All right, so if you look at the screen here, you're going to notice a configuration file. And we've looked at configuration files before. You'll notice that a lot of the lines of text have a hashtag or a pound sign in the beginning, which stands for commenting out, so that when Linux boots up and attempts to read this file, it just skips over everything with that pound sign before it and goes right to the uncommented areas, right? So in this particular configuration file, we see that SELinux is enforcing and SELinux type is targeted. So let's take a look at this file together. All right. This file controls the state of SELinux or Security Enhanced Linux on the system. Enforcing, it starts to, well, it tells you that SELinux can take one of the three values, and it defines the three. Your SELinux service could be enforcing, right? Like an enforcing mode, which means that the security policy, the MAC that the system administrator set, is enforced. So if they put access controls on certain files or directories or devices, that'll be enforced. Permissive, if it's set to permissive, then SELinux will print warnings instead of enforcing. So it won't necessarily enforce or stop that access, but it will pop up a warning saying, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this, all right? And then finally, there's disabled. disabled, that is that the SELinux policy is not working at all. It's not loading at all. So it's you leave your system vulnerable again. Now you can see that SELinux is set to enforcing, and if you want to permanently change it on a system, when I say permanently, I don't mean that you can't go back and change it again, but you want it to be persistent, right? So every time you log on, you have this certain state you want your SELinux to be in. Well, this is the file where you do that. Any configuration files like that. But in the SELinux configuration file, you want to set this right here. You literally would VI, let's just mess around with it. We won't do it. VI, right? And then you're going to go to SELinux. And then in here you would, and I won't do it, but you would go into insert mode, and you would come down to this line, you would delete all of this, and then you could change it to type in the word permissive or disabled in place of this text right here. And then of course save your file, get out of there. All right, so go back here. That's how you do it, so you keep it persistent. Now if you want to log into your system, let's clear out of here. All right. And you want to check the status of SELinux. Here's the command for that. SE status, enter, and it gives you a lot of great information. The first thing it does is gives you the status, and on this machine or this server, it is enabled. It shows you where it's mounted. It shows you the root directory, as we talked about in one of my last videos. So if you went into the root directory, you'd go to etc and you'd see SELinux there. It's a targeted policy. The current mode is enforcing. The mode that's in the configuration file is enforcing. So if we go into the configuration file and we changed it to permissive, say, then restarted our machine, and then we went in and put SE, if we changed to set enforce for like a temporary change, and then you pulled this command here, then what would happen is it would say current mode, whatever you changed it to, right? But the mode from configuration file would say permissive or whatever you set it as. So those two values could be different. And then there's some other information on there. So this is the very basics of SELinux and where to look in the system to see what's the status of it. Stay tuned for another video where we start digging a little bit deeper in how to enforce or change the status from the command line.